Hey friends, welcome back to the library. Today I have with me my friend Katie. We're going to be talking about all things bookish, and I'm really super excited to be speaking to you. I've kind of been wanting to do this because you have a nice little TikTok platform, and it's so pretty. I love all the things that you do. So tell me about your journey through the bookish world. Like, how did you get started? And which platforms, like, do you prefer a specific one? I do, but
So I actually read in high school, quite a bit. A lot of people, based on the books I read now, wouldn't think that I read these books, but in high school, my preference is, it tells you how morbid of a teenager I was Laureline McDaniels and Nicholas Sparks. If you read one, you read the other. They're both very depressing. Somebody is terminally ill and somebody ends up dead by the end. Um, well, not all of them. Like Laureline McDaniels has a book called Pray, and I don't think a lot of people would read that now because of what's going on in the world, but it's a teacher student relationship, but back then that was written for more awareness that it was going on more than
yeah.
it was to be a dark romance or to be, you know, romanticized. It was written more for awareness, but um that was all I read in high school. I grew up in a conservative area, so like our it was very kind of limited on what we read. Like it was a big deal when they put the 50 Shades of Grey books in our library. Like it was a
Ooh,
hot topic
yeah.
then. Um, but like my dad like was like, I dare you to bring those books home, or I dare you to read those. You're gonna be in
Ooh.
so much trouble. But so like it was kind of limited, and I lived in a small town, so like those were my two preferences, and that was like how depressed I was as a teenager. And then I did theater, so like I would mainly only read in the summers because I was memorizing a script all year and I didn't have time to read, and I was kind of wishy-washy. And I read some, like my husband was like, "Why do you buy books all the time, but you never read them?" But I would pick them up, and just not have time to read them in early
Yeah.
adult life. And then I like really wish I would have started reading them during COVID when we had all that time instead of listening to podcasts. Because that's all I did during lockdown. But I was sitting at work one day, and I hate the title of my favorite book, but it started as a web novel, and it's only sold at Barnes and Nobles, and the first two parts of it are available. And I don't know how many more parts of it is coming out because this author is not very like published. She doesn't have
Uh-huh.
like a good Instagram account. But her like pen name, because I don't believe like that's her actual name. I think it's somebody that sits behind a computer, doesn't want her real identity out there. But it's Alice Night Sky, and it's called Breeder to the Alpha King. I
Yeah.
was on Facebook and just saw this big thing, and I saw this really cool video, and I just started reading, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to read this story. Like, that's so good. It
Yeah.
was like the first chapter, and then I was reading that over and over again, and then I went to the bookstore and picked up a couple books, and that's where it started in 21.
Wow. It's really interesting. It's crazy how everybody's story is a little bit different because um I've had my nose in a book since I was a really young teenager. I mean, I stopped on and off because we moved a lot, but for me, it was like every chance I got, I was finding a new story to read. Whether it was like something that I found in a store that I picked up or I found like online. I was a Wattpad reader.
Me
I was
too.
one of the I was one of those kids. So now that I'm like, this stuff is getting published, I'm like, give me all of it.
Yeah. Um,
Send it all my way.
that's actually like everybody hates Icebreaker, and I'm like, that's why I love it, because That was what I read on Wattpad
Yeah.
when I was, because
Yeah.
while I wasn't allowed to grab 50 Shades of Grey out of my library, Wattpad was on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
My parents had no idea. And
Yep,
that
me
was
too.
my exposure to romance, like real
Mm.
romance, not Nicholas. Because, like, okay, like my dad watched The Last Song with me. So
Huh?
obviously you see that there's no sex in that movie.
Right.
So he was like, yeah, whatever, she can watch that. Ain't got nothing to worry about. So like when he saw Nicholas Sparks' book, he didn't think nothing about it. But like, Wattpad was a forum where people were on there writing everything and had creative freedom and but a lot of people hate Icebreaker. Trying to think of a couple more books that I've read that people are not fond of that were once on Wattpad. There is a like Harry Potter fan fiction, which I've never read Harry Potter. I wasn't allowed to growing up. I just watched them like a year ago.
Hmm.
And it's Manacle. You ever heard of
Oh,
it?
yes, I've heard of it.
I
I've heard of
really want that
Miracle.
one when it comes out because I have a feeling like it's up my alley because
Yeah.
it was once on Wattpad. But I've seen a lot of controversy on TikTok about it because of topics. And that's like the thing, like the book world is so different from when we were kids because me and my
Mhm.
gay best friend, that's how our friendship formed. So when he actually hated me at first because people told him I was this nasty, mean, awful person.
Oh.
And he didn't get to know me. And he will tell you, he's like, somebody came up to me and said, hey, she's very judgy. She's very mean. She's very awful. And they just like pulled the context out of the situation. They didn't tell him that they were dating somebody that was underage and that I just kind of gave them the side eye and just got quiet because I didn't
Mm.
know what to say. And my husband made Chris Hansen jokes about it. So like the person was pulling the context out of
Yeah.
like what was like really happening. And so when I like got around him, I was like, I saw books on his desk all the time. And I was like, hey, I'm reading this book. And I was talking about the Breeder book. That's what I call it because I hate the name of it so much because it was updating every night. And he was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, that sounds like a really good book. And I would just tell him the update. And that's how our friendship formed. So we would like sit and talk about books that we read as kids and just books all the time. And that's how our friendship formed. And we actually like had a conversation about like how toxic it can be sometimes now. And
Yeah.
like just how people like let books like just divide them sometimes right now.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if have you read Never by Jessa Hastings?
I have not.
I don't think it's been out very long. I just got it. I blame Emily McIntyre, but I wanted it because I was like, this is one of those books. If you liked Hooked, you're gonna like it. And
Say less.
kind of the same. It's kind of the same. But I hopped on TikTok because I was like, I'm gonna be so upset if she ends up with Peter. I'm not finished with it yet, so I don't know. I was like, I'm gonna be so upset. I want her to end up with Hook. So bad, so bad. Um, and there was so much controversy about the book. Like it was a complete divide down the middle, just because one sentence, like some people took it way out of context, and it's a dark in my eyes, it's a dark romance. So like it's like we get offended about this, but in A Court of Thorns and Roses, there's a 500-year age gap.
Yep.
And I'm like,
It's highly romanticized there. That that's something that always bothers me. Like, for especially for dark romance, it's such a niche sort of thing. Like, if you're in it, then you know what you're getting yourself into.
Mhm.
And my thing is if the author did their due diligence of actually putting up a trigger warning list or it's accessible somewhere and you don't go and check it, if you have trigger or you think that there may be something like in your life, some sort of trauma that may something may happen, like you if they did their due diligence of putting it up there, you need to at least heed the warning. Like, you need to go in with a mind of, like, "This is possible for it to be upsetting for me," and then for you if you don't, and for you to get upset about the author writing that, even though they gave the list, it's in there because most of them print it at the beginning of their book, or they have some sort of note.
So, spoiler alert, in case anybody's listening, um, the topic that I'm talking about, and I've not got there yet. One of them is Hook is 22 years old, and
Mhm.
the main character is 17, and he's like, "I will not kiss you until you're 18 years old," and people are upset about that. But it's like, one, it's a dark romance, but two, Feyre and Rysand are 19 and 500.
Yep. And it doesn't even exactly say his age, it's just over 500 years old. So he could be 500 and some change, almost 600. Like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
wouldn't know, and it
Yeah.
yeah.
And for me, like, I no hate to anybody who has read Hunting or Haunting Adeline. I can't read that book because I have a huge stalker trigger, and my husband pointed that out to me. I was reading Twisted Love and Twisted Lies, and my husband said I had some behaviors. And it was those two books particularly. I was reading the entire series because usually when I start a series, I'm like, I got to do the whole series. I'm too OCD. I can't do this.
Mm,
Cannot read books in between. Um, he was like, "Why are you looking out the window constantly?" And I have a stalker trigger because I had a super psychotic boyfriend in the past that was very stalkery. And so any book that has like stalker tendencies in it
mhm,
can't can't do it. So like
mhm.
if you like have researched or like if you've looked into Never, I just wouldn't pick it up if that's something that would bother you.
Yeah. Well, and part of that is a lot of people are like me where they don't granted, I have no triggers. Like, I don't have anything I'm at a point where, like, yes, some things have happened to me in my past, and I have some trauma going on. Those are things that I'm slowly healing from, and yes, there are some situations that put me back in that place, but I have such a like, for me, it's not that I lived, like, this golden halo life where I didn't it just does not trigger me in the way that it does other people. Like, there are some people who can read things like Haunting and Hunting, and it completely trigger a response to where, like, they are no longer safe. They don't feel safe in where they are. They don't feel
Yeah.
safe, like, anywhere they're to themselves. Like, they're a possible harming situation to themselves. And there are other books that do that as well. And it's not that I don't have situations where I'm like, okay, I need to stop before I because there like when I was reading that, I've had a similar situation to you, but I knew my own limits and I knew when I had to stop reading. It wasn't that I couldn't read it at all. It was that I needed to stop reading and get back in touch with reality and stop trying to escape and sit down and have a conversation. I had to go sit down and have a conversation with my husband and be like, all right, like I'm having a hard time going through this book because there's XYZ in it. And he's like, okay, well, why? What happened that makes you feel this way? I had to I'm in a place where I can sit down and speak to him about that. I have someone I can depend on. But there are some people that don't.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It was like I had to s I have to realize there are some people that can't. There are a lot of people who have been assaulted, um, in many ways. There's like 97% of us.
Yeah.
Um, and there are some people that can't read about that. I can skim over it and move past it to get through the rest of the book.
Yeah.
It's not something that I'm, like, romanticizing, like, "Oh, that's okay," because not at all.
Yeah.
It no way is it, but I was not assaulted in a way that like, I don't have a triggering response to reading it. I just skim over it because it's one of those, it makes me uncomfortable, and then I keep moving.
Well, my childhood best friend, she said, you got to also understand, because I told her, I said, I do not get it with that book because I just didn't at first. I was like, how do people read that? Because I would have nightmares from
Yeah.
that. And she said, Katie, there's just some people that exist that have never been through stuff like we have. And they just don't know. And to them, it's just a book and no big deal. And they can just pitch it and go forward. But for me, like, I didn't even know that I was having a reaction to it was particularly Twisted Love and Twisted Lies. And he was like, Katie, my husband, he was like, Katie, why are you so jumpy, honey? Like, because I was just like sitting still and he, I guess, would move and I would just like jump or be like staring out the window looking for something or someone. And he was like, honey, what are you like doing?
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't think so. And then like he like was sitting there waiting for it to come out because I'm the type of person, if something's bothering me, it'll eventually come out.
Me
And
too.
he was like, okay, so let's talk about what you're reading because that's when you're getting jumpy. And then like it came out and he was like, okay, so here's the deal. It sounds like that reading is what's bothering you. So it sounds like you cannot read anything that has like stalker tendencies or controlling personalities.
Yeah. Which unfortunately, that's one of those more popular, I don't wanna say necessarily romanticized, but it is a more popular to talk about because for some people, writing about it is therapy for them. A lot of authors that I know, they write about some of the things that they've been traumatized about. Um, 1, for education, and 2, it is, like I said, a form of therapy to kinda get it off your chest. If it makes a good story, somebody's bound to read it.
Yeah.
That's just kind of my cup of tea on that. But, um, so, like, yeah, I'm just kinda it's one of those, I feel bad because that's the situation that it is, but in reality, like, there's not much that I can do about it.
It
Like,
never
there's
offends me if somebody hates a book that I love, or
yeah,
I like if they love a book and I hate it. But some people just cannot have that opinion.
yeah.
They
That
just,
distinction's not there. They feel like because it's something that you agree with, like, that you read, that you necessarily agree with it, and that's not the case. That's just like just because for example, I'm a Swiftie, just because I like her music does not mean that I necessarily agree with her political views
mhm,
or anything like that. Like, I'm not a particularly political person, and of course, that's not what this is about, but it's just that distinction of, like, just because I'm listening to her music because she makes good music in my opinion, or just because I'm reading a book that someone wrote because I like that trope or I like that person's writing does not mean that in any way I align with anything they say or do.
yeah. Um, you know, like that's something that actually gets like pointed at about me as like a Christian that I read like books that other Christians shouldn't or think that you shouldn't read. I think it's all about your mind and what you put in there and allow to be put in there. Like, but I just, I'm here to love people, not like judge them. So like if somebody loves like thrillers, can't read them. Get jumpy then. Like
Yeah.
Verity, I loved Verity. I love Colleen Hoover. I've not read all of her books, but I loved Verity. Had nightmares.
Yeah.
Had
I got through Verity and Layla, and then I tried to pick up, I think, and Reminders of Him. Verity, Layla, Reminders of Him. It ends with us and it starts with us. And then I tried to pick up like all his perfects or something, and I couldn't get, there was an emotional detachment of the female main character in that book, and I was like, no. I don't like the way that that character is responding to something. Like her attachment of this void, like, and I know that's real for some people, that they are so depressed and so much in a grief that they have this complete emotional detachment. I cannot read that. I cannot, I don't relate to that. And it's hard for me because I've been there. So to like, or I've been partially there. Like I can't relate with it because now that I've come out of it, I have to remind myself regularly, like, you can't allow yourself to get to that place because your quality of life dips so much, and you never want to be like, I have to remind myself that I never want to put my loved ones in that situation because
yeah.
I have many. And so for them to be, it's not acceptable for them, so why would it be acceptable for me, is what I have to tell myself. I have to basically, like, slap myself and be like, "All right, come on, pay attention." So, like, for me, I can't read it because I'm like, "That's not
Yeah.
er."
So, so with Verity, like again, another spoiler, the particular part was when she was standing in the top of the stairs with her fist all gripped.
Yep.
I was in one of my friend's house New Year's, and I just had a dream that somebody was in the doorway like that night after reading that. That's why I can't do thrillers. So like my whole thing is like, do I hate you or like dislike you or dislike your opinion if you only read thrillers? No, I just can't read what you can.
Yeah.
I mentally can't take it because I won't sleep. Jeepers Creepers like petrified me as a kid. So I
Mm,
just can't read stuff like that. Like my husband's favorite author is Stephen King and Riley Sager. Cannot pick up those books.
nope.
I
I've
would.
said this before, and I'm like, "I'm a Halloween girly, but I'm the cute pumpkins and cute little, like, fall-ish decor, but not the scary movie. I'm not that."
So embarrassed to admit this. This is just kind of a funny story. This is like how like people love watching scary movies with me because they love to laugh at me. I embarrassed the crap out of my husband. It was one of the new Halloween movies. So like I love houses, love to like my first house, renovated a few projects on it. And I was looking at the house that he lived in as a child and I go, oh, they did such a good job. And like I said that a little loud in the theater, like it was packed because it was like opening weekend of that. And that was one of my husband's like childhood things. And he like rolls his eyes. And then it gets to the part where it is he's like killed one of the gentlemen in the home
Mhm.
and they're like hanging there and his significant other finds him and I just scream, "Run, mother!" And the whole theater erupts in laughter because like I'm just so panicked. Like it's like
Yeah.
I'm there with them. Hate that I said that, just so you know, but that's like how like out of it I get with scary movies. Cannot stand them.
Goodness. That's crazy. I mean, I end up having nightmares too. That's just where it is. Like I watched Twilight for the first time as like a 12 or 13-year-old, and uh whenever Bella is finally taken and, like, she gets bitten and the venom's running through her system and everything, she's, like, screaming bloody murder, and, like, that's when the rest of the coven shows up and they, like, start ripping the man to pieces. I had nightmares about that for weeks after watching it. I didn't even read the books, like, I still won't I might go back and read the books now that I'm older and can handle a little bit more, but, like, that was all. It was just the first one, and then I went back, uh, at 16. I skipped the first one and watched the rest of them, and then, was actually able to go to the midnight showing of Breaking Dawn Part 2, and I was fine for the rest of them, but that one scene in the very first movie was, like, really gruesome for me, and it was terrifying because it was like they literally, like, ripped someone apart. It's spoilers, if anybody I'm sorry, I'm not sorry at this point, like, it just is what it is. It was terrifying. I
Well,
could not.
that's another opinion like people hate that I have. Um, and like people don't ask why I have that opinion. I don't like Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey because I do not have the best relationship with my real mother.
Yeah.
And those were kind of forced upon me. Those were her thing. So I actually did not like fantasy at all until I found them on my own.
Yeah, fantasy is one of those, like I had this discussion with somebody prior because I feel like the younger generation no longer has the same imagination that we have,
Mhm.
just because, while I understand trying to entertain children is something, and I do feel like, tablets is fine and all of that, there's also so much of a, um we're getting away from giving children space to find their joy in things that are not tablets, TV, gaming, um, that sort of thing, internet-based stuff. Like, we're just sitting them down in front of TV to watch cartoons, and a lot of cartoons nowadays are educational. Um, for a couple years, though, it wasn't that case. I feel like, really between kind of 2010 and 2018, there was this gap of where it was just like, give them the tablet and let them do whatever they want on it, and they were watching like, I watched my younger siblings go through this, as I have 2 younger stepbrothers, and it was just kind of like they're allowed to play whatever games that are free download, they watch whatever they want on YouTube, and it was like, it's such a dangerous place for kids. We're not giving them the space to go outside and, come up with something with their imagination or, let them color something inside or give them Legos or blocks or something. And it's like, yes, Legos and blocks are a pain in the behind to pick up off the floor. Like, I babysat for many years. I have nieces and nephews, and my cousins have kids, and I was the oldest grandchild, so there are 9 or 10 after me that I watched growing up. So, like, I'm familiar with cleaning up after children and entertaining children.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, like, I understand that those small things are a pain in the behind to find, to step on, to have to clean up. But those same kids are now in their 20s to 30s range that mainly did that. And look at what we're doing. Like,
Yeah.
you know, we have careers, we went to school, and granted, school is not for everyone, I understand that, but it's just kind of one of those, like, we had to work on, like, the vision is no longer really there. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like it's missing. So for me, it was like one of those I every time I get to a point where I'm like, I see a kid reading or I see a parent, like, taking them somewhere and, like, giving them the opportunity to speak and, kind of grow their own not necessarily identity because that's an ever evolving thing in my opinion, but, just the space to be creative. is kind of, it's mind-boggling to me that we've shifted back into that and there's this gap.
Yeah.
And I really like that it's coming back, but I feel as though, like, not necessarily for, like I said, space, not forcing someone into it like what you've experienced, because I kinda had a little bit of that, um, being forced to, you either, like, there was a certain spot in my life where my parents were like, "Okay, you're either going to choose to dance or play a sport or
Yeah.
etcetera. You're gonna choose something outside of school
Yeah.
because what you're not gonna do is sit at home all the time." And I'm like, "Well, what if I wanna write? That requires me to be,
Yeah.
sit down or," but
Yeah. And with that, a lot of people, there's also like positive with my reading too. So I know like people that know you don't know me, but
okay.
if anybody follows me comes here, because I put on my Instagram story this morning, I filmed a little thing. I was like, let's go be a guest on a book podcast.
Yay.
Um, and like I'll put a link on it when it comes out. But my mom's mom is my mom in my mind, and a lot of people that know me know that. They know that I feel that way. They know that I think that. They've known that for years, and that's where my book reading started. It started with Narnia when I was 9 years old, and
Well, what a great place for it to start with
yeah.
with a children's story that is basically like a world inside of a wardrobe, and it's completely like one of those, you really have to have an imaginary, such like a really good creative mind to see it when you read it.
And for preference, like my if anybody this is a joke me and my friends have. Rebecca Yaros like calls me out with my mommy issues with her writing because
Period.
things we left unfinished is like a piece of my story, like with her grandmother and her
Mhm.
mom. Like that's like essentially like I have a friend and I said, you know how you read that? That's me and my mom and my mom.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, so she's narcissistic and she's self centered and all about herself and only cares about her and not you. And I said, yeah, pretty much. Like I haven't spoken to my mom in a couple of years.
That's
But
crazy.
like when my mom had me like in love with Narnia, my mom actually had a huge problem with it. And it was fantasy. And that's all she read.
Weird.
Yeah. And but my mom loved it because it was based like C.S. Lewis is, yes, a atheist turned Christian. So before you hand them to your child, just know that they're based off the Bible. But if you go into it and just hand it to them, they just think it's about animals and children in this world called Narnia outside of Earth. And it's a
Yep.
good time and a good adventure. But also, if you stick those books with them beside a Bible, they can kind of figure the Bible out easier as they get older. Kind of helped me when I got older and not get so frustrated figuring out
Yeah.
my Bible. But yeah, that's where it like essentially started. So then that also shows where you can have one good relationship with a parent figure and a terrible one with book
Yep.
reading. And then my mom lost custody of me when I was 12. So the first 3 years of my life, even though my mom lived there too, essentially my mom and my pap had me, even though me and her both lived there and she was the primary custodian. And she like, moved on with her life and met my stepdad and things fell apart. And when I hit 12, my dad fought for custody of me, and that was a whole mess in my life. But when I went to live with my dad kind of fed into what my mom was already doing. Like he would take me, there was a store, I don't know if it exists anywhere now, but it was called Hastings.
Oh, yes.
Um, it's not here anymore, unfortunately. I was like, I wish it still existed. But we have McKay's in Knoxville. It's pretty good. I love it. If you've never heard of that, I don't know if there's one in your area, but like it's just rows and rows and rows and rows of used books.
That's crazy. Now we have half price books, and then there are a bunch of other stores that typically carry them, but it's not solely books. Aside from that,
Yeah,
crazy.
but my dad, so I went to an independent school, and if I explain the school systems in our area, I'd be here all day. But like I went to an independent school, so it's not a private school, it's still a public school, but it's like branched off from a public school. So
Okay.
it's a little more higher than your average public school. And they were really strong on reading anyways, but my dad kind of still fueled it a little bit more with my mom. And like my dad bought me Speak. Have you ever heard of Speak by Lori Hassel Anderson?
I have not.
So I would recommend that book to anybody that has a daughter. Very strong message. Don't know how it's kind of died out, but trigger warning, anybody, and it's kind of spoily. It's about a rape victim and her art project. And if you see the cover of it, that's the art project that she's working on. And it's a bunch of lips on a tree.
Uh-huh.
She's expressing what she wishes she could tell people because she's carrying around the trauma and not telling anybody. And somebody figures out that it happened to her, and that guy tries to come for her, and eventually everybody at the school stands up for her.
Oh, wow.
And it was just a really good book. And even though, like, Dad didn't like 50 Shades of Grey, he would let me read powerful message books like that. So he would fuel things like that with my reading. So he kind of fed into that a little bit.
Yeah, that's good. It's really good. So tell me about your book social platforms, how you got started there.
So my TikTok, obviously, it's kind of makeup and Jesus. But when I started reading, I was like, hey, obviously you guys see that I read now. Do you guys just want to see what I'm reading too? And just started like posting that too. And I would post one as I finished it, and it got kind of redundant because I was finishing them rather quickly, but I didn't know, like, I was still trying to figure it out. And book talk wasn't like hitting my For You page yet because I wasn't like on TikTok very much anymore because I was reading more. And then I started like looking for book groups on Facebook, and then got into a really little one, and it's closed now. The person that had it never got very big. They closed it and met one of my really good friends. I'm actually friends with her daughter now and talk to them both all the time. Kept her, and me and her went to a few groups, and I'm in a few, but like that's when like it's more of a Facebook thing for me than it is like Instagram. It's all over my Instagram, but it's not on my Instagram page. It's on my stories. Like my TikToks go on my stories and my written reviews. But I just do a wrap up on TikTok once a month because when I'm doing one book, I just can't say enough to make it a long enough video or make it like, so I just do the wrap ups.
Yeah. That's the thing. TikTok has been like it's very hit or miss.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've done some content that's like edits, which some of those get really popular. And then I've done some contents where it's like videos of me. And those do pretty decent, but I pretty much stay in like the 200, 300 views range, which is pretty good because I only have about like 500 followers. But I don't even know if the majority of them are actually my followers. So it's like whatever. But it's very much one of those like I feel like in order to post consistently, I kinda have to give up reading
Mhm.
because you have to have enough time set aside or make enough content in one day that you can post a little more. Like, if I'm trying to post every day, at least once, so that I can get some consistency for people to watch, um, it takes up a whole day to make that much content, and I'm like, "I could have spent this 8 hours finishing a book
Yeah.
or, doing something else." Um, and Bookstagram, I feel like it's really just, like, you either have an aesthetic or you don't, and that is all its own thing. Like, I feel like if you don't have an aesthetic, there are certain people that are like, "I can't."
Well, I mean,
Ugh,
you see, like, my handwritten reviews, I use the same template on Canva that's free, and I write one for you all just to get one out there to you all. And then I tell you all the wrap ups are funnier because one of my friends in high school, so I did theater, that was like my initial plan, which that's why I like social media better. I'm in control of what I put out there and, don't have a director like told me to do stuff I don't want to do.
yeah.
And um, she was like, I just want you to be in a romantic comedy one day because of your facial expressions. So when I'm talking about book, that's why I tell you guys it's more funny when you see my wrap ups. If I'm like talking about how a book made me feel,
Yes.
than just like if you think my written reviews are hilarious or whatever about what I'm feeling, then watch the video.
I love that you use the Canva because I feel like it's one of those everybody uses the same stuff and yours always looks different. Like, I don't see it very frequently. So I'm like, I always ask people, I'm like, "Do you have to tell me how you made these?" Your reviews are really funny though. I'll have to watch one of your wrap-ups. I feel like I follow you, but I never see it sit anywhere in any of my following. And
It's
I've been scrolling TikTok like late at night.
it's
That's probably
really
why.
it's really weird with my TikTok because there's people who see like everything and there's people who will see nothing. They'll be like,
I don't ever see anything.
yeah. And I don't know if it's your like the niche you follow or
Maybe.
I don't know. Um,
It's a wide berth there.
yeah, but like people, there's people who are like, well, and I'll be honest, like part of losing my job has been a blessing because I was really depressed. I mean, you know the story, like with how I lost my job. You seen the, the,
Wild story.
um, but that person had me in such a state of depression, like Brandon. So I would like wake up at 6 in the morning
Mhm.
and stare out till 7:30, and he'd be like, "Hun, you've wasted time. You've got to like go now. Like you got to like put clothes on and get out the door. You're gonna be late." Like, and I wasn't reading in the evenings anymore. Like literally the other day, because I've been reading never, because it's not on audiobook. He said,
Yeah.
"Oh my gosh, she's actually read a book again. The world is turning again." Like he wasn't being a smart aleck. He was like, "Hello, she's woke up again.
Hey.
She's normal." Oh my gosh.
My husband, he he cracks me up because he'll be like, every once in a while, I see you carry like a actual physical book or two with you, and like he's like, I always know you have your Kindle with you, or you have your Nook because I have a Barnes and Noble Nook too. He's like, "So I always know you have one of your e-readers with you, but, like, every once in a while, I see you carrying a physical book, and I'm kind of taken back." And I'm like, "Why? You see them show up in Amazon packages, like, you know they're here. There's a whole corner in a room filled with them." And he's like, "Yeah, but you end up reading them on your e-reader." And he sent me it was like one of those TikToks the other day, and it was like, one of the excuses I told my husband as to why I wanted a Kindle was so that I could save money and not buy as many physical books, but I still ended up buying them, and he was like, "Yeah, this is you." He sent it to me, and I was like, "I'm so glad you understand. They're my trophies."
Yeah, my husband was like, I actually want one of those for my eyes because, well, my head. He said that to me because he wears glasses and he was once cross-eyed when he was younger and had a surgery to correct that. So his eyes are really sensitive. Like if it snows, he has to put sunglasses on because the glare of the sun hurts
Oh, yeah.
his eyes really bad. So he was like, I really want one because he was looking at my Paperwhite. He was like, I really need one of those because it's so easy on your eyes.
Yeah, they're great.
Um,
I have I always get so confused because they have so many different versions of the Kindles, but I have the 11th gen Kindle. It's not the Paperwhite, it's the one that was released in 22 after the Paperwhite for 11th gen was released in 21, and it's just a little bit smaller in screen size. And I tried to order a new case the other day and was not paying completely all the way attention in Amazon and ordered the Paperwhite one, and it got here and I was so excited and I was gonna film a little redecorate my Kindle with me, and I started pulling it out and I was like, "This is wrong," and I almost started crying because I was like, "I'm so disappointed." Like, I started filming and everything, and I was like, "And I already got my new stickers out." Yeah, I have to send it back.
so what's an unpopular
Disappointment.
book opinion that you have that most people don't like?
Um, that's a good question. I feel like I'm gonna go off of something that I said in an earlier podcast. As long like I don't mind a s- a book being well used. Like if I've passed it to friends. Now, obviously, I don't want it damaged. Like there's a difference between misuse, damaged versus well loved. Um, I'm not a fan of spine cracking. Like if you get like a brand new book, it orders from Amazon or you pick it up from a store and it's a paperback and you go in and like spine train and stretch it a little bit so that you can read it and you're not cracking it while you read it. Or um if you're one of those that just immediately like folds the book in half and cracks the spine, it really gives me tingles. I'm like, because there's a reason there's a binding. And like as you're reading it, you're stretching it. So if you want to spine train and like stand it up on its spine and take a couple pages from each side and just kind of
Yeah.
use your thumb to flatten them out a little bit so that you can hold it. Um now, if it ends up cracked while you're reading it because it's bigger, that's a little bit different. It's cracked from use and not from intentional. Um, and like I don't see a point in buying a brand new book and ripping the binding off to rebind it if it doesn't need it. But I also am like 50-50 because it's your book, you bought it, so I can't really like I would be upset if it was mine if if I was like, "Hey, you wanna borrow this book? It's really good. I recommend it. You said you wanted to read it." And then it comes back and it's damaged or you've decided, "Oh, I'm gonna rebind it for you," or something, and I doubt that will ever happen because nobody I know rebinds books, but that's probably it. It it's one of those, like, I feel like a hypocrite when I say it, like, I don't mind if it's broken as long as it was broken from, like, being used and not intentionally broken just because it makes people feel icky.
Yeah. My worst one is, and it's because it was. I hate the way it looks. It looks so terrible. It looks like I threw it around, and I really didn't. Honestly, I have a wrist injury, and the paper. It's so tall. It's
Yeah,
heavy. Like
yeah,
I can't read Silver Flames hardly. Like I had to set it down a lot, or
yeah,
like lay it on my lap to read it. Um, But my Tawny Suchi book, yeah, yeah. My Tawny Suchi book, the spine, like, in the middle has a huge crease,
yeah.
and
My Silver Flames has a crease, and I'm kinda sad.
yeah, and my poor Lauren, my original Lauren Asher books, my, Dreamland Billionaires, those poor spines, they're so thick and short. They did too, and I know I didn't know the hack with the training them back then.
Yeah,
Book Talk did. do that for me. But I got new copies now, so I'm gonna cut. But I bought those specifically because there's paperback covers on Etsy that I want, and I want to like put them on top to display them. They're like jackets that
Yeah.
somebody designed and they're watercolor and they're just really pretty. But not the point. But yeah, like I cannot stand the spines to be broken. I hate that.
Okay, so one thing that bothers me, and I don't know if it's just the way they're made or if um it's something else, but I'm gonna bring out so I can actually show you. Anybody else will just have to try to find me somewhere on social media and ask me to show them. But um first of all, for a long time, I really did not like the um I'm not a fan of hardbacks. I just don't I can't hold them as well. They make my hand hurt, but they all come with the slip covers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't necessarily like the slip cover either. It's part of the reason why I can't hold them well, and they don't stay like while you're trying to read them, they slide, and it just.
I took
But
them off.
when you're looking at a hardback, the spine itself is not the actual binding of the book, like what's on the outside that's printed. If you look like, if you set
Yeah.
it up on its spine like you're gonna spine train it as if it were a paperback, there's a little white, like, material thing inside. That's the actual spine of the book. And if you are dead set on reading and you're sitting, like, on a table or something and you lay your hardback flat, that spine separates from the outside cover, which is the actual spine, the right white material, the binding, separates from the spine of the hardback itself. And then it bends and it cracks.
Yep.
That is one of the main reasons why, like, if I tell somebody's like, "Oh, do you prefer hardback or paperback?" I prefer paperback. But there are some editions of certain books that I will end up with in hardback. One, because they were secondhand and somebody gave them to me, because somebody bought it for me, because it was the only one I found and I really wanted it that day, or it's got a special cover, etc. But the
The
main reason that I don't like hardbacks is because the binding actually separates from the cover and then it cracks on its own just trying to read it. I have plenty of work related, like self-help and business related books that have broken spines in that manner, and it irritates me.
So, because of my injury, that's why I actually prefer paperbacks. But I'm like you, I only have hardbacks if an author absolutely refuses to do paperback. And like, there's a series that I've been dying for. Angie actually bought me the paperback, and I've been waiting
Love
for
Angie.
it. It's the it's the vampire series. It's the first one I'm ever going to read in my adult life. It's the Wings and Serpents of the Night.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Um, I like was so against vampire stories because of Twilight, my mom. And I like asked my book group, I was like, is this anything like Twilight? Because I've seen the fan art, I've seen TikToks of like the aesthetics of it, and it
Yeah.
looks like my breeder book, and I think I would love it. So I just want to read it because it looks like if I think it's remotely close to my breeder book. So just I hate the name of my breeder book. I'll always call it the breeder book if you ever hear me, because I hate the name of it. I told Cody, my GBF, that I was like, I hate the name of it. So we're just always going to call it that because the name's redundant, it's ridiculously long, and it's gross and cringy. And it takes away from the story. So, like, if you like A Court of Thorns and Roses, From Blood and Ash, I would love to tell you the book I just mentioned, but I don't know. I haven't read that yet. But the aesthetics look the same. But if you like our high fantasy, you would probably definitely like the first one. Um, it was on a web forum called Story Room. That's where I read it. Facebook used to, when Book Talk started blowing up, it would throw those advertisements and like give you the first couple of chapters
Yes.
on Facebook. And that's how they hooked you in. And it was really expensive to read those.
Yeah.
But, and that's why I started going to the bookstore. I was like, there's probably better books at the bookstore, way cheaper. But, yeah, if anything like is like that, I'm automatically like, I probably will love that. But it like was not gonna be in paperback forever. It's the only reason I've never read it. And I was like, I know if I pick up that book, it's gonna hurt my wrist.
Yep.
Divine Rivals. It took me forever to read that. I actually ended up reading those on audio, but I got them on Kindle just to have them. But I was going through my depression, is why I ended up reading them on audiobook the Kindle. I have read a book.
So I saw them getting popular. And I was like, I want to check this out. So I went into Libby and set up for the audio. And I knew I was going to have to wait. And I was like, that's fine. And finally, I started it. And
oh my gosh.
I started it. And the tension and the banter. And I literally went onto my Twitter because I finally started Twitter for the podcast. And it actually ended up on book Twitter. Like I ended up in book tweet. And so I tweeted it and I put it on my threads too. And I was like, why did no one tell me about this banner? Like everyone is like, oh, it's so good. It's so good. Like they're so like it's fantasy and da 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 da. No one said anything about the banter between the two main characters. And this enemies to lovers, rivals, banter. And I'm like, it's giving everything. And the voice actors did it perfectly.
Yeah.
Like just the sarcasm and the wit.
Somebody was like, the book is so slow. And I was like, because I didn't read the book. I said, I didn't have your problem because I was listening to the audiobook. And they're hilarious. But
Yes.
I'm not spoiling anything, so you can hear this part. But if you read Divine Rivals, you better buy the second book immediately because the ending of the first book will devastate you.
Okay, I finished and I'm the kind that like I'm just gonna have to wait because if I started it in audio, I've got to finish it in
Yeah,
audio.
I did
So
that.
like I did Divine Rivals and then I got ready to do Ruthless Vows and I realized it had a massive hold and I was like, no.
Well, it wasn't out when I did it. It wasn't out yet.
Oh God.
And I was like, oh my God, no. Because you're just like,
That back section, the last section.
yeah, you're like, oh my God, my
Crying.
heart. Because it's just devastating. That's all I can
Yeah,
tell
it
you.
really is.
Devastating. And you better borrow them back to back. Like literally back to
Put them on
back.
hold at the same time.
Most people have them on Audible.
No,
They
that's
don't
true.
use Libby, but most have them on Audible. But yeah, it was devastating. It was so devastating. That's one book that broke my heart. That I'm so glad that Court of Thorns and Roses was like, I did not get into that
Finished.
early on in the series because I
Yes.
imagine that the wait between Court of Mist and Fury and Court of Wings and Ruins was that painful.
I mean, honestly, because I was wrecked. I literally finished the last 4 in 3 days. Like, I was flying through them. Like, I read ACOTAR, like, the actual Court of Thorns and Roses, and it took me a couple weeks to get through it all the way because I was like, okay, first of all, my first impressions of Feyre were really not that great.
Yeah.
I really did not like her. I'm sorry, I'm a Nesta girly. It just is what it is. But I got into Mist and Fury, and I was like a couple hundred pages in and I had to go to work and I was like, I've got to take the next one with me. Like I already know I had to have Wings and Ruin ready because I was gonna fly through that mug. And I did. So my gosh. Actually getting ready to start Throne of Glass. I read those almost a year ago and I was like, I need to collect Throne of Glass while I was reading it. And I had a couple books, but I never actually started. Now I have all of them except for The Last Crescent City, just because they never release the paperback when they release it to the world. It irritates me. But
I haven't. I
I
have
know.
all the Throne of Glass. I have not read Throne of Glass. I read. So my friend, I was telling her about my reader book, and she like was relentless, like talking like the Grinch, relentless. She was like, "Hey, I'm telling you, if you love that, you've got to read A Court of Thorns and Roses." And I don't know if God was just on my friend Alicia's side, but we have a book group local in Kentucky. It's called Bookworms. And like, it's just a once a month thing. You mail somebody a book. It can be used, it can be new. My very first one, somebody bought me the entire box set. And she had been aggravating me, and I said, "All right, Alicia, guess what I'm reading?" And I never ate my words so much in my life. I like first one was done in 4 days, which for me, and that was one of those things that coworker complained about. He was like, "She's constantly reading," but my work was always done.
I mean, if it's
Um,
done.
yeah, and that was my boss's mentality. He was like, "Who cares if she's done? Like, if she's done, who cares?" But had it finished in 4 days. And I was one of those people, like, after the first 5 chapters, I was sold. I was in. Like, there was no going back. You weren't prying the books out of my hand. I was finishing the series. And there's, like, 3 opinions with Court of Thorns and Roses, I noticed. Like, people are like there's like, "I didn't like it till the last 15% of the first book, and then I loved the rest of the series." And then there's me where you're like, if you'll give it to like chapter 5, you may not love it, but you can get on with it and finish.
Yeah.
Or they DNF it and hate it.
Never pick up. Yeah. I feel like I do I do really feel like I feel in that I fall in that first category of like the last 15% of the first book was really where I was invested because I felt like not enough happened in the first book for me to really be like, "Oh my gosh, I loved it." Like it was just one of those I tolerated it because I knew that there was more to come in the series. And I was like, this cannot be all that there is for
Mhm.
there to be 4 more books and, this author be that huge. And so, I had somebody explain it to me. I was like, "Somebody please explain to me, like, why it's so like, if this series is so big and everybody's favorites are not the first book, why is it so important to read the first book?" And somebody was like, basically, when you're looking at the overall arc of the story, the first book is the precursor. It's like it's essentially like your novella for the beginning, like your backstory.
Yeah.
They were like, everything really happens later, and all the interesting, like, you've got to know the backstory. Like, you don't necessarily have to know the backstory. Like, you could start with the second one and just kind of get into it and then put it together. as it goes. Like, you could get why people don't like Tamlin and all of that. Like, that's really easy. The
Yeah.
stuff that he says and does in the second and third books, you're just like, all right, I don't like this dude. But
So not to
um,
spoil for anybody, but when I go back and reread them, I actually don't reread more than half of the first part of the book. I
Yep.
go back to, so I do the graphic audios because they're the best way to
Yep.
do ACOTAR if you're going to reread them. I go back to the part where she meets Reese the first time and start from there and finish it and then finish the series. And I do not reread Court of Frost and Starlight.
There's like this 50-50 on like people who really like A Court of Frost and Starlight and people who didn't. And I feel like it was necessary to wrap up a little bit more of Feyre and Reese's story in that novella before you move into Silver Flames, because Silver Flames is no longer about Feyre and Reese. Like, they are there and they are important to the story because they are Nesta's siblings. But it's really Nesta's journey. It's really about, you know, her having to go through what she does. And
Yeah. I know that is why I don't reread that, because I tell people that are reading it the first time, I say there's a reason you need to read it, and it's very quickly if you'll just hurry up and read it. It's literally 200 pages. It's a very
yeah,
quick read. I don't even think the audio is like 4 hours long. It might be 6.
yeah.
But that piece with you know in there
Yes.
and,
Okay.
and like everybody's like, well, why is it important? Because here's how I describe it to people. I'm like, it's basically a little Christmas novella for them. It's their type
Yeah.
of Christmas, but there's something in there that you need for the next book.
Yeah. Yep.
It makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, for real. And I do honestly feel like there are a couple of theories about like Amarantha was Tamlin's mate, or or you know, like,
Come on.
people don't understand how Lucian and Elaine are mated. And spoilers for anybody who hasn't read, I'm sorry. How it doesn't make sense that the two of them are related. But if Tamlin goes off the way he does and Lucian's set to be his emissary who takes over, that technically makes him, you know, the high fae of the Spring Court. And Elaine is this flowery, butterfly. I'm like, yes, it makes sense, but no, it also doesn't, because who does Asriel get? I'm an
So
Asriel girly. I feel like
I'm about to like wreck your world a little bit. I saw a different theory.
please share.
Have you ever heard the original tale of Beauty and the Beast?
Uh, if we're talking about the original, not the Disney version, but the one that was,
Like the original.
no.
So I've never read the original tale, which is, again, goes back to why I don't understand why people are upset about Never by Jessa Hastings. Like the Peter Pan tale is quite terrifying if you've never heard the original story of Peter Pan, not the Disney, but the actual story.
Actual, yeah.
But I've never read that, but there was this big long thread about, I don't have the post anymore, like it was taken down. It was originally on TikTok. It walked through the story of Beauty and the Beast and then it goes to the drawers. And this theory points towards Tamlin and Elaine.
Hmm.
And it points out that Feyre and Nesta keep making comments throughout the series how much Elaine would love the spring court.
I mean, yeah, she really would.
But it's like a speculation that Elaine and Tamlin will end up together.
Uh,
Like, and I don't, I hope that one's just like thrown out the window with the next book.
yeah. I mean, when you get to the end of the series and you've got Rhysand feeling whatever type of way, and I don't remember right off the top of my head, but he feels whatever type of way so much so that he goes and checks on Tamlin. And Tamlin is so much in his feelings and really woe is me about something that he did and stuck in his beast form.
Mm.
He refuses to really, and like, oh, okay. Part of me is very much like, you go, Feyre. You get your, you get your payback. You deserved that. Like, you were really wronged. But
Yeah.
then part of me was also like, you know, it was kind of messed up. But at the same time, if it takes one female, one who hasn't even been in the spring court that long to ruin the spring court, and you were supposed to be the one who's overseen it for how long? Were
Mm.
you really all that good to your people? Were
No.
you really all that high and mighty and loved by your people? Like,
And,
yes, she was high and mighty and loved, but that's because she went and had to go save you
yeah.
because you didn't put up a fight.
And a lot of people go for Reese over the pregnancy thing in Silver Flames. And they're like, we want our redemption arc because, Reese was so terrible because of that. And it's like, I kind of see his point, but also maybe if he would have let Feyre know, she probably could have figured it out because she was super smart
Yeah.
and good at
But
everything.
in the arc of everything,
Yeah.
in the overall theme of all of the story, that needed to happen for Nesta to have her moment.
Yeah.
To have her, this is where I make a difference. This is where I stand up and finally repay my sister because I couldn't do what she did in the very first book.
That's what kills me about why people still hate Nesta because they act like she didn't change.
Right.
And it's like,
And you know what? Rhysand was a prick. He was horrible to her. Like, I've said this before and I will continue to say it. He was like, yes, high and mighty Feyre, and oh my gosh, Feyre, and all this. He was a horrible person to Nesta.
yeah,
And I get Nesta was not the greatest of people to everyone else, but look at the trauma she went through
yeah.
that we downplayed, that we massively downplayed in this story. Look
Speaking
at
of,
how she was raised and the relationship she had with her mother
mhm.
before her mother died. And then look at how, I mean, Elaine is just stuck in the middle, and Feyre has no recollection of her mother, no real recollection of her mother.
Speaking of downplayed traumas, that was one of my many, like, well, not really many. I didn't have a lot of icks with Divine Rivals. That was one of my icks with Divine Rivals was the downplay of grief when someone dies.
Oh, yes.
Did you notice like none of the characters like react to death grief like real people do? Like they just like scoot by like
Yeah.
grief isn't this thing. And I was like, when my mom died, I kind of lost it for a little bit.
I do feel like, and I'll put spoilers everywhere on this whenever I post it, but I do really feel like for Divine Rivals that when she found out her mother died, she had the most accurate representation of grief that was possible without really halting the book.
Yeah.
Like you were so much in shock that it doesn't register really with you until you get to the police station and you identify that that's really her, and then you have no recollection of making it home or how many days have passed or however much time, because you're so much stuck in this, like, this almost false reality of they can't really be gone. Like when I get home, they're going to be right there in their chair, or they're going to be in the kitchen doing what they normally do, or they're going to be, yelling at me from down the hallway or whatever. It was one of those very much like, and I understood also from her point of view, it was like she's been busting her butt
Hmm.
trying to provide for her mom because her mom has been so much stuck in this downward spiral.
Yeah.
So it was like almost a mix of relief for her. Relief that she really only has to provide for herself, but then that grief of like all of my childhood is gone.
Yeah. Um, yeah. For me, like, I think I've noticed it more because it wasn't like that for me. And
Yeah.
it's not like that for people that grieved around me. Like they might not have acted on my level of grief, but they didn't like shut it out like she did almost.
Yeah.
Which I mean, some people do that. It's just not very often. Some people don't deal with grief at all.
Yeah, some people just move right past it.
Yeah. But it's really rare.
Yeah, for real. I have the physical copy of Ruthless Vows with Divine Rivals, and I wanted to go back through and kind of reread Divine, and um I wanted to go in and annotate so that I could move into Ruthless Vows, but I really feel like I need the impact that the audio is gonna have on me since I started it that way, and you can really feel some
Yeah.
of the desperation for the characters. You can really feel like the narrator's just such a good job at really trying to portray like the
So,
the emotions behind the whole story.
not spoiling, but just want to give you some hope. It's sort of like Mist and Fury and Wings and Ruin. Kind of like the same type of vibe, like where female smart, it gets figured out
Yeah.
and good things happen, but your nerves are kind of shot a little bit
No.
to get there. but
No.
but you're like, oh my gosh, you guys gotta get back. You guys gotta,
Yeah, yeah.
because like for anybody who's not read it, it's a book about war.
Yeah. It really it's
It's pretty much World War II, but with gods instead of dictators.
yeah.
It's essentially like world. Is it in the same time period as, I don't remember the year exactly that it is, but is it essentially the same time period as, I know it's an older time period.
I feel like it's around that time.
Yeah, like they don't have like cell phones, they like OG write letters.
Typewriters and
Yeah,
handwritten stuff, and yeah.
these
I do feel like it's around that 1940s, 1950s. I get almost a 60s vibe. Not kind of like 20s to 40s where it's flappers to like
mhm.
oorah women, but like we're already a little bit past that.
Yeah.
Um, the normalization of women in the workforce and still being slightly oppressed, but trying to,
What's
yeah.
a book that you love that everybody else doesn't like?
Oh God. Um, That's a really great question. I I don't know that I have one that I've seen a whole lot of hate on. I The most hate I've actually seen is just on ACOTAR, really, and I really loved it. Now I haven't started Throne of Glass, so it could change, but
So
between
I actually like ACOTAR better than Crescent City, and people are stunned by that.
I haven't I wanted to start Crescent City, but I haven't read Throne of Glass, and I heard that it won't make sense all the way until you read Throne of Glass, so I didn't wanna put myself
I
there.
somebody because I'm a person like you can tell me like a small detail and I'm not like upset that it was spoiled to me or anything.
Right.
But also like if a death comes, I kind of need to know because I do have a little bit of a death trigger, but if I'm mentally prepared for it, I don't feel like I'm reliving my mom's death.
Yeah.
Like I don't feel like those feelings are coming back if I'm emotionally attached to a character. So I asked one of my friends, who dies? Who dies? But
Yeah.
I was like, how does Throne of Glass tie into this? Because everybody's saying that it's already tied in and they explained it a little bit, but I have not connected, and it may be because there's only 3 books out, which I've not read the 3rd one yet. I will work on it after I finish the audiobook I'm working on. I'm gonna do that one because it's a 30-hour book. Um, but and also I think I would have listened to it better had I got to the graphic audio ones. It wasn't out yet when I started the first 2. It was just the regular reads. Um, but the characters in that guitar, you just connect with them better, in my opinion. But I feel like maybe, and I mean, I could read Throne of Glass and have a totally different opinion. I feel like Throne of Glass is going to be my favorite series. And not because it's bigger, but I just feel like that one's going to be more of my series based on fan art I've seen.
Yeah. Okay. I have one last question, and then we can kind of wrap it up. Tell me about the last 2 or 3 books you've read, what you rated them, kind of give me, like, a mini wrap up.
So I have read. So the last one of the last ones was From Blood and Ash. It was the first one. I'm currently trying to finish the second audiobook. Um, I would rate it a 4. Um, it was. I didn't expect to like it very much. That's probably why it took me a long time to read. I had seen some fan art and it just didn't seem as enticing, and people just kind of downplayed the book more than it really is. I don't know how to explain it without like really giving it away. But like it's almost like I want to say it's got dystopian vibes, but basically
Mhm.
the female main character like lives this life where it's not real essentially. They've like made her life, made her believe one thing. And this guard that's new to her, it's the trope is he isn't who he says he is.
Mm,
And they're protecting her from the dark one.
okay.
And um it just basically falls apart throughout the book and you're just as shocked as she is. And that shock factor is what makes it a 4. Like it's not a complete 5 because
Mhm.
it doesn't like floor you that great, and it's one of those books. Why didn't you write a full like a big like 1,000-page book and just release it all at once? I don't know if they do that for publishing purposes or like contracts or what, but it's really annoying when like it cuts off, like it cuts at a good point, but you're like aggravated because you got to wait so many months. Like if you just pick
Yeah.
for the next part, and like it picked up where it left off on the second book, and there's some things that I know I'm not gonna like about it later on. Because the fan art, I was like, but I just like the two main characters together. Why you gotta do that?
Yeah.
But, and that's just a personal preference. That's not hating anything. It's just a personal preference. And again, it's fantasy. It's a book. Like, it doesn't affect my everyday life. But, I don't know what like book, TV show or thing to compare it to, but like, it's kind of like Venom in Fourth Wing.
Okay.
What they say is going on, except for it's called Craven.
Okay.
It's kind of a similar thing, but it's not what it's a lie to her. Like,
Gotcha.
they've lied to her. But I really like it. I didn't expect to like it. But then what was I working on? Oh, I read Crescent City 2, 1 and 2. Try not to give heavy spoilers, but the only reason I read Crescent City was because I knew that they tied into A Court of Thorns and Roses. I was actually quite mad for a long time because of the giant SJM group on Facebook. I saw the last sentence of the second book.
Oh.
And I was like, great. Already
Yeah.
like sort of know. And so like I didn't pick it up for a long time because I was like, well, now I know like how it works.
Yeah.
But then like I like the first one. Unpopular opinion, I like the first one better than the second one. I only liked one thing about the second one, and spoiler, it was well, I guess you would have to read it to understand, but day and night.
Okay.
That was the only thing I liked about the second one. It was just like I was listening to it and I would just get too lost, and the plot would just go up and down too much, and it was just lose me. Whereas the first one
Yeah.
just consistently kept me.
Okay.
And I was finding out more information in the first one. And then the second one, I was just like, uh. But, and at the end, if you're reading Crescent City, really, you got to really pay attention at the end because you're not going to know who's who at the end if you're not focused.
Oh, goodness. Now I'm excited. I need to go start with Throne of Glass.
It's written to confuse you because it's when one of the connections is made.
Okay.
So you think, well, if you're reading it, you think you went somewhere, but you're somewhere else. But if you're with Bryce, you have no idea who these people are. But if you're us and you've met these people before, you know who they are.
Okay. All right.
But no Throne of Glass characters are there yet. Yet that we know of. I mean, they might come later. And also when you're like on TikTok and stuff, watch spoilers because I listened to a clip of one because I was too nosy. And the spoiler was a complete lie. They said that Nesta and Azriel were together in a different type of way.
Huh.
It's like, do not break my heart like that. Cassian's my man. No. And I had to wait till my friend finished it, and I was like, please, for the love of God, tell me that's a lie. Because there's this like cryptic thing that Elaine said about Cassian in Wings and Wings. And there's like this theory that something bad's gonna come later in the next two A Court of Thorns and Roses books.
Yeah.
Oh my God, no. Please, God, no. Don't let this be it. I was like, do not kill
Um,
my man. No.
yeah, um I'm iffy on that one. But
I know, like, everybody's like, I'm holding out for Azriel, and I kind of get that. But, like, Cassian reminds me of my husband because that's how me and my husband talk to each other.
mm,
He has to communicate. So that's more of where I'm a Cassian stance. I get, like, the mystery with Azriel and being curious about him, and I'm really curious as to who he's gonna end up with. Like, I'm kind of in the middle. Like,
yeah,
I don't think I'm gonna be upset one way or the other.
I probably will. It is what it is.
Well, like, I can see it going with Gwyneth because of her and Azriel's history.
Mhm.
And, like, I'm like, that can make sense. But do I prefer Azriel and Elaine? That's my preference.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, I'm ready for those books.
I am too. Because to me, and nobody else really talks about this, I'm stuck on why Azriel is repulsed and disgusted by smelling the mate bond between the two of them.
Yeah.
Like, why is he the only one that does that? He just says nothing about Favor and Rasan, says nothing about it's only them two.
Mm,
Like, are they like, do they smell like hot garbage or something to you? Like, what's the deal?
yeah, for real. But but thank you so much for joining me. I really had a great time talking to you.
It's good to come.
It was really good. Yes, and we'll have to get back together and discuss more theories because I have a feeling this is going to be a thing.
Yeah, yeah. Like, you'll just have to, like, maybe have like another reader that is like once, like, you've had 2 or 3 people that have read all 3 of them go back and forth on what they.
Yes. Yeah. We'll do I'll see if I can't get some of my friends to start reading Throne of Glass and Crescent Cities. Um, and once you get through 'em, we can all get together and do another episode on them. That'll be fun.
All right, sounds like a plan.
All right.
Bye.